All right, everyone, we will be commencing our webinar on Stratford versus Challenger now. Before we get started, my name is Zubin Israni. I am a ICSE board scholar. That is my education background. For all my fellow Indians in the webinar, I attended the ICSE board and I was a governor's gold medal. I'm an Indian education specialist here in the Bay Area. A lot of networks with the Indian parents in the Bay Area, so assisting them with the decisions on, say, the top private school districts, the connections with the top public schools and higher education. I primarily operate in that capacity. I'm also a Math Kangaroo medalist and consultant for Think Academy, so students who are interested in higher math competitions and how to ace those sort of examinations. I do help out parents with that as well. And finally, I'm a Think Academy G3 mastery teacher. So for kids who are beyond their grade and are excelling in class, I have a lot of expertise working with these sort of kids. And now that you will know me a little bit, we can begin with our Stratford versus Challenger comparison. But before we do so, let me ask you guys a few questions. So I have submitted a poll in the chat, and hope you guys can answer it right away on the Zoom with the first question on here. Yeah, just want to gauge the audience and see what it is about this that interests you guys so much. All right, so most of you guys are saying pre-K to grade 3 as the grade that your child is in. Well, that's natural, right? That makes complete sense because this is the age that you're looking at these sort of schools. Well, it's not a necessity. Obviously, if you're in higher grades, you look at the top private schools such as these two as well, but it is more common to enter this sort of phase at the preschool level. This is where you're making major decisions as to where to go from here. So that's good to see. And it is very important to have these sort of discussions right now because the schooling type that you choose right now has a major impact on the kind of development that you want your child to go through. Oops, it seems that you cannot see the slides. Just a second. Are you able to see it now? Just a second, having a little bit of a technical issue. All right, I think we are good to go. So, yes, as we discussed, this is a very important phase of your education journey because the kind of school that you choose right now has a major impact on the kind of learning environment that you want to put the child into. The school is not only important for the academics, but the extracurriculars, the kind of learning philosophy that you want the kids to be exposed to, especially out here in the Bay Area. Some of these schools are at a very high level, and the difference between some of these schools compared to the public school is at an even higher level. So typically the public school core curriculum is at least 1 year to 2 years behind the private school core curriculum in the Bay Area. So your choice of school, be it a top public school, a charter school, say a great value private school like Stratford or Challenger, this decision is very important. And each school has their own philosophy, their own strengths and weaknesses. So I'm happy to see that you guys are starting out so early. Yes. All right. So with that said, let's begin with the enrollment logistics. First, we will begin with the application procedure. And then we will conduct our analysis of the differences. So when it comes to Stratford, the enrollment logistics is as follows. As you can see, the age is typically is 2.5 years to all the way up to 8th grade is the average populace. That's their age. At preschool is 3 years, pre-K is 4 years, and K is approximately 5 years. But they do have some restrictions, so it's not exactly 5 years. When you go onto the website, you'll see that there are some age restrictions. For example, if you're trying to get into K and above, elementary school level, you will have to be born before a certain month. Say, for example, in California, the typical one is December 2nd. The teacher-student ratio for K and below is 1:12. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because when I say 1:12, that is the ratio, but usually for K and below, it's because there's 2 teachers, and the same classroom does have about 20 students. So it's not that the classroom is small, but there are 2 teachers. And for other, which is for the higher elementary school, it's 1:24. So 1 teacher, 24 students typically is what we see. Some campuses might vary. The application process is on a first come, first serve basis. There is a deposit, and there's a deposit penalty for quitting the application or withdrawing from the application. The online schooling, now this is very important for parents who are interested in the enrollment for online schooling. The reviews for Stratford are actually very mixed. So the problem with that is that the teaching quality or the faculty that's hired for online schooling is actually selected through a different process compared to what they do for their normal selection of their in-person teachers. So you will see that the in-person teachers are at a different level of quality. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all bad, but the reviews are certainly mixed. The location, if you're a early parent, so when I say early, I mean if you're a younger parent, say you have just moved into the Bay Area and you actually haven't even decided your living situation right now, but you want to plan ahead, and obviously schooling is one of the most important decisions you'll take while buying real estate, is Stratford usually ends up in locations that are very, very metropolitan areas, very cosmopolitan areas. So in Palo Alto, San Francisco. But this is a plus for parents who haven't purchased housing yet, is Stratford usually goes into areas where there is no other top public or private school. So basically no other schools to compete with, but they are still busy areas. So a lot of the students, what they do usually is, not the students, sorry, the parents, what they do is that if they want to save some money, they would go for a district which is relatively cheap to live in. It's the Bay Area, nothing is cheap, obviously, but they will go for that sort of district, and then they'll save some money there, and then they'll send their school to Stratford because no other school is there in the area. So Stratford serves as a good location choice. So that is something, definitely, if you're a new parent who hasn't really looked at where to live yet, that is something you need to look into, because Stratford is a good option for cost saving. Now, in terms of the enrollment logistics for Challenger, the enrollment age is similar. It's 2.7 years, so 2 years, 9 months. The preschool, that's where it begins. Pre-K is 4 years, and K and above is 5 years. And again, there are some specific restrictions. For example, if you're in Texas, the enrollment age is 5 years old by September 1st. For Nevada, it is by September 30th. And for California, it's by December 2nd. I don't know why those differences might be, but they are pretty strict in terms of their recruitment for students. The teacher-to-student ratio is slightly better. It is 1:14 on the Challenger campuses. Now, this is an average, of course. Each campus varies by the location. And if you go on the Challenger website, the application process does demand that there will be an interview where you need to pass certain scholastic expectations, and student needs to be motivated. And all these keywords just goes to suggest that the students need to be comfortable with the sense of discipline. I will get to the different philosophies of both the schools, but if you go on the website, you will simply realize that for both the schools, it's different philosophies. And if you're trying to break in, as long as you really echo their philosophy, you will get in. It's not that difficult as long as the student has good grades. And obviously at elementary or lower elementary stage, you don't have a lot of evidence for grades, but you convey the sense of discipline. For Challenger, the application process and admission will be relatively smooth. So here's the steps. You tour the campus, you read the policies, and you submit your application and the deposit. That's similar for both the schools. And I do recommend to tour the campus for both the schools, especially Stratford. The Stratford campus varies a lot based on the location, similar for Challenger, but not to the same extent. And besides that, in terms of the enrollment logistics, part of the biggest part of the logistics is, of course, the finances, right? So let's dive into that. Stratford and Challenger both are very similar, but let me break it down by pre-K, elementary, and high school. For Stratford, the pre-K is rounded down to 23 for the year. Elementary is 21, and very important. Stratford does plan on opening its high school around 2022. So for parents that are in upper elementary and are worried about, okay, where do I go from here? Stratford does have their high school coming up. And in the initial years, at least, the admission from upper elementary to high school will be pretty smooth. So you don't have to worry about that. And as you can see on the right side of the screen, you'll see a graph for the breakdown if you're interested in, say, a half-day schooling, which is just sort of like daycare. If you're interested in that, that's the breakdown. There is also a 10-month full school day. And as you can see, the elementary is slightly cheaper than the pre-K in terms of finances. This is very similar to Challenger, where the preschool is about 20 and elementary is actually 21. So that is the key difference here. There is an application fee, which is fixed for $125. In Stratford, the application fee, if you start the application and you abandon it, there will be a penalty charge. So keep that in mind. That will be a non-refundable $500. So if you do start the application, I recommend completing it. If you compare both these schools, however, to say something like Harker, which is one of the elite private schools, you will realize that the ROI, return on investment, in Stratford and Challenger level schools is a lot better. Obviously, everyone's situation is different, and if you can afford it, then it's a completely different ballgame. But purely in terms of the return on your dollars spent, these schools offer a comparable level of education quality, certainly way higher than the public school core curriculum at a much better price. The half-day rate is similar across most levels between Stratford and Challenger, but you will notice that for Stratford, the preschool finances are slightly more expensive, with the rest being relatively the same, both being a lot better in terms of value compared to schools such as Harker. The academics. Now, this is where we get in the nitty-gritty, where you get into the learning philosophy of both the schools, why it is so important to analyze both these schools, because it pretty much determines the next couple of years. And yep, we've released a few more polls to see where the students are at. Let's begin with Stratford. Now, in terms of a general overview, the academic workload is balanced. That is the best way I can describe it. Hey, Sanket, I see your hand is raised. We will take questions in the end. Don't worry, we will have a pretty elaborate Q&A session, so I will answer all your questions in the end. In terms of the general overview for Stratford, the academic workload is very balanced. By that, I mean 40% of the curriculum covers English language and literature. And very important here, Stratford has a unified curriculum, but a non-unified teaching guideline. What do I mean by that? That means all the campuses of Stratford have the same curriculum, but at the end of the day, Stratford allows its teachers to teach in their own style, in their own, say, methods. It is very flexible. That is why when I started the enrollment logistics, I recommended to tour both the schools, especially Stratford, because based on the campus, each campus will have a different faculty. And it is in Stratford specifically where the faculty has the choice to teach the same syllabus in a different way. So each campus has a different quality of education. It's not standardized. Now, if we dive deep into the STEM, Stratford, the math competition accolades are very dependent on the location. So some parents have told us that, say, schools in the San Francisco region have a lot more accolades in math, such as Math Kangaroo, these competitions at an elementary level. So it is very dependent on the campus. Uh, However, it is very well balanced between STEM and arts. Arts, if you take a tour on any Stratford campus, they will for sure tell you that their facilities are much more superior and expensive compared to any other private school. And this is true to a certain extent. From an early stage onwards, they do emphasize arts a lot, and they back it up with the facilities. They give you large uh, facilities for arts. They also give you other aspects of schooling that basically lead to socialization of the kids at an early age, large playgrounds, all these activities that lead to socialization of the kids through communication at a very early age. Arts is an integral part of that. And the language, this is very important because the offerings for Stratford are superior to most top private schools when it comes to the languages. We have surveyed over 100 parents, and here at Think Academy, we have a lot of parents from Stratford, Challenger, and even Harker. So we have a very good understanding of where the schools are strong in, and Stratford is definitely superior in the languages aspect because they offer Spanish at a very early age. This is important. Now, you might think, okay, I don't care too much about that, but if you're looking at that from purely academic perspective, foreign language is a requirement when you go to high school, because when you're applying for colleges, most of the top private colleges, public colleges, Ivy Leagues, they will have a foreign language requirement. And if you start learning this language late, or say even if you learned it early and you did not have a good foundation in this, it typically students take from 6 months all the way to a year to boost their language skills in the foreign language department. However, kids that go to Stratford are very strong in this at an early age, so they essentially save this time when they go to upper elementary and high school. So this is very important. Now let's get into Challenger. If I had to give you a general overview in terms of the academics, it is a very high workload compared to Stratford. And what do I mean by high workload? If I had to define it for you, it is 2 tests a week. Some students do have to face about 2 hours a week. It is common. A lot of parents have said that 2 hours a week is the going rate, even at sometimes for lower elementary. Now, this is where it's very important. The unified curriculum is throughout all of Challenger's campuses, similar to Stratford. But not only do they have a unified curriculum, they also have unified teaching guidelines. What do I mean by that is that the curriculum is the same across all campuses of Challenger, but the way the school expects the teachers to teach is also standardized across all campuses. So the philosophy is very well defined. They want the teachers to teach in a certain way. Now, with that comes a certain standardization, which makes it easier for parents to know what they can expect from Challenger. The variance between the teaching quality between each campus is less for Challenger because of this very reason, because the teaching is relatively the same. Yes, each campus is different, but if you compare it to Stratford, it is a lot less variance in terms of the teaching quality, especially when you get to STEM, which is where they excel. Challenger curriculum is heavily leaning towards STEM. It is similar to most South Asian private schools. Now, within our research, we also, beyond researching the academy parents that we have and we're close to, we also want to get different perspectives from, say, parents that are foreign, that have just moved into the Bay Area from wherever location. A lot of them come from South Asia. So what was shocking to hear is that from all of the South Asian parents that we surveyed, a majority of them said that the schooling in Challenger is similar to a private school in South Asia, wherein there is a strong record of STEM faculty and a strong emphasis on getting a diligent sort of environment, workload that is high, maintaining a sense of decorum. So this is very similar to the private schools in South Asia. They have a great pool of medalists for math competitions across all campuses. So Math Kangaroo, all these elementary school competitions, in math specifically, they have great accolades. This comes from their great teaching faculty as well. Most parents have vouched for their STEM faculty being very much superior to other schools. However, language is where the offerings are limited. Challenger, unlike Stratford, has no offering for Spanish. This is obviously imbalanced. So you can look at it from two angles. You can say that, okay, the development of the child is imbalanced and the learning is very much specialized, right? Now, that's not good or bad. It depends on your perspective. But the second thing, which is for sure, and this is not like perspective based, this is not subjective, is that if your foreign language offerings are weak early on, like I said, when you get to upper elementary and high school, you will have to spend more time boosting that language, because when you apply for colleges, this is a necessity. You need to have a strong foreign language. If you do that early, not only is it easier to do it at an early age, you get more fluent as you go on, and it saves you a lot of time in upper elementary. So Challenger's weakness is definitely in the languages department, and most people will tell you that. So let's look at both of them from a broader perspective. If you look at the academic load, Stratford is certainly less than Challenger. When it says excellent, good, and average here, again, this is subjective. It is based on what you think is great. But if I had to rate it out of 10, I would say the academic load is a 7 mark. It's not less. It certainly wants you to keep on pace. It expects you to be a student that does not fall behind, but it is not a lot of workload. Challenger, on the other hand, is a lot of workload. As I said, students are expected to have sometimes even 2 tests a week consistently. And even at a lower elementary stage, students have complained about, say, stress levels being high, especially at the early elementary levels. So that is something to note. Language, Stratford does edge out on an average, as you can see, compared to Challenger for the reasons we discussed before. Foreign language department is much more stronger in Stratford, and the curriculum devoted for languages, specifically English, is about 40% in Stratford. So the emphasis on communication skills, interpersonal skills is high over here. STEM, I would say Challenger edges out pretty comfortably. It is a straight 10. There is great reviews for the faculty consistently across all the campuses, and it is more standardized. So what happens is when you have a school that is very defined in its philosophy, you get students that know what to expect. So it creates a learning environment in which everyone is on the same page. And when that happens, you can specialize very easily. That is one of the reasons why the STEM edges out, because yes, the faculty is great, but everyone knows what they're there for. So the STEM does edge out of there. Arts, like I said, because the emphasis is more balanced in Stratford and the facilities are there for it at an early stage. Stratford does edge out on that. And the accolades, both have been given a score of 8, but it depends on what perspective you look at it from. The accolades are more balanced for Stratford, so you will have, say, the same number of achievements for math competitions like Math Kangaroo, but also for debates, Model United Nations. So it is very parsed out evenly, I would say. But for Challenger, it is heavily in terms of the math competitions that they're winning. So that is for the academics. But if you look at the extracurricular activities, that is also one of the most important parts of your schooling experience, right? The academics is one part. The extracurricular is where the students get to venture into their interests, see what they like. This is more for long-term progress and growth. If you look at Stratford, their extracurricular activities are such that it poses for a very overall and holistic development of the child. If you go for a tour, that is something they'll say again and again, that it is holistic development. They try to strengthen all different aspects of the child. Because of this very reason, some elite private high schools, if you are going to go from a private elementary school to private high schools, this is a very niche approach. I'm not saying everyone does this, but if you do, then some elite private schools do prefer students from Stratford over Challenger, because of the expectation that the students are more all round. The emphasis on team building is a lot more in Stratford. So the emphasis on team based on the extracurriculars is a lot more. They try to encourage leadership skills, a lot of teamwork, interpersonal skills. So all the extracurricular activities are based on teamwork. That is why the school has a vast area of accolades across math competitions, debates, other extracurricular activities. It's very well balanced. Like I said, this is not the case in Challenger if you look at all the campuses on average. If I had to generalize, the learning philosophy and the extracurriculars are taught in a more militaristic way. Some parents have characterized it as rote learning. So memorization perspective, right? For example, I myself went to a very typical South Asian private school in India. And what happens with specialization is that you know that you want to focus in the sciences and mathematics. That's where your passions lie. And it gives you the time to, say, venture into interests that you know you have. Say, I will focus on math competitions. And okay, I do like, say, tennis, so I will do that on the side. So it is a very defined sort of framework on how you would split your time. That goes to show that this is all your perspective, right? If you think your child is best suitable to go through a learning philosophy that is more materialistic, that emphasizes on decorum and discipline, and you think those are the characteristics you want in your child, Challenger does offer that, right? It emphasizes on individual academic excellence. The switch to private high school might be more challenging for some schools due to enrollment preference. This is very important. As I said before, Stratford, some private elite high schools do prefer Stratford kids. But again, take this with a grain of salt, because it depends what school, right? Each school, just like Stratford and Challenger, even at the high school level, has its own philosophy. So for example, if you take a school like BASIS, they are very much focused on the sciences. They will have no problem getting a kid from Challenger because they know that these kids are great in the STEM field. Number two, at the end of the day, if you are trying to get into a private high school in the future, you will have to go through an interview process. And even though you are from Stratford or Challenger, at the end of the day, going to a certain school is not going to be evidence for your great communication skills or interpersonal skills. Showcasing your communication, leadership, teamwork by having a conversation at the end of the day, that's how you convey them. So if you think your kid is great in that department already and you want to specialize in, say, something in the science field, Challenger will have no problem getting to even the most elite high schools at a private level. So let's summarize the key differences. Over here, Stratford is focused on team building with the extracurricular activities. You have debates, spelling bees, math competitions, all of these with the mindset that, hey, we're working as a team. So you even competitions like Math Olympiad are very famous in Stratford because it is a team-based math competition, right? And Challenger is more focused on individual excellence. That is why you will see a lot of gold medalists for, say, Math Kangaroo from Challenger. Not to say that it's not present in Stratford, but if you're comparing, it does edge out for Challenger a little bit. Stratford is more likely to have expansive facilities for the arts and even for recreation to promote socialization of the child. You want to have your kid have some social skills at a very early age, so we'll give you all the facilities you need to do so. And finally, Challenger does offer some extracurriculars, but some of them are external. So when you go for a tour, they might tell you that, hey, we offer XYZ, but take that with a grain of salt. Ask them, okay, are you offering it, or are you giving the opportunity for, say, a third-party person to come in and offer it? Because the problem with that is when the school is offering it themselves, they make time for it in their schedule. But if they are having someone come in and offer it, then it really is you balancing your own schedule. Sometimes you won't even have the time to do it. So take that with a grain of salt and make sure you ask that question when you're touring the campus. In terms of what's common for both of them, It's pretty clear that both of them are superior to the public school core curriculum in the Bay Area and other locations as well. They're 1 to 2 years ahead. This is pretty much standard across most of the curriculum. You can see a major difference between both of these. They do have a higher level and quality of teaching. They are highly dependent on location, but like I said, this is more for the case of Stratford because of the non-unified teaching style. Both of them do offer a better value for money compared to the elite private schools like Harker. In purely from an ROI perspective, yes, Harker might give you better admissions and those sort of things, but not at the cost that it demands. So that is the difference and those are the difference and commonalities between these two at an academic and learning and extracurricular standpoint. But when we were doing our research, we thought it would be a good idea to get some important qualitative feedback from parents in the Bay Area. So we've surveyed more than 50 parents, have in-depth conversations with them, and we decided that it would be very helpful for you guys to look at the common perspectives that they all had. So I haven't displayed all of their discussions, but I have picked the ones that were the most common or shared the most common sentiment. So let's look at some of them. When you look at Challenger, this is from actually the Challenger member she was the president of Challenger, so this is a very important source that we have. When they were talking about Challenger, in particular the negatives, they said on compensating for the lack of extracurriculars, Challenger offers after-school classes, but they are not led by professionals other than chess being again a more analytical field. I was with Challenger for many years and my children attended too. My son only until 6th grade. I pulled him out because of the lack of sports and just saw no scope for personal and character growth. The same person on learning culture, this, by the way, is a president, so the viewpoint does hold a lot of value. On the learning culture, I have to admit that I was a true dedicated part of Challenger due to its mission until the founder, Mr. Baker, was alive. After Mrs. Baker, after her passing, the more militaristic graduates took charge, and the policies she fears were more ingrained towards the lack of compassion and warmth that slowly made her realize that it is not the place that the founder started and developed for more than 60 years. Again, these are individual perspectives, so take this with a grain of salt, right? Me personally, I don't look at it like this. I think it depends on what your student needs, your child needs. If your child would thrive in an environment where you do think he or she needs a little bit of discipline and decorum, and you think that their interests are aligned more with the STEM field, then this is perfectly fine, right? They can handle the high academic workload, and you already know they're fine in the other departments. So this is subjective, but it is a common perspective that some parents have told us. But on the same side of the coin, others have said differently. I have not mentioned the name of this parent. They prefer to maintain anonymity, but they are a parent that moved from India during middle school, and they have an engineering background, just so I can share the kind of background we're dealing with and the kind of parents that we're surveying. On compensating for the lack of extracurriculars, this is a parent that preferred Challenger. So my daughter studied at Challenger Sunnyvale from 6th grade to 8th grade, and we chose Challenger over Stratford, even though 100% of the people we spoke to prior to the choice said they preferred Stratford. The main reason was the vibe during the school tour. At Stratford, we felt the focus was more on overall development versus any focused aspect of studies. They talked more about the art facilities than studying. We were not impressed, probably because we had just moved from India, from a very academics-oriented school, and we never regretted our decision. This is important. That goes to show it is all about perspective. If you think this is the right environment for you, then nobody can tell you otherwise, right? Me personally, I feel this way as well. A little bit of decorum doesn't do any harm. but other parents have echoed this sort of sentiment. So you can see most parents have complained about the workload and the stress levels, but some parents think that this is the one that is right for their kids. On Stratford, so this is a champion school parent, another school that we haven't covered today, but we will cover in the future. Uh, this is a parent that moved from public to private in grade 2 and considered both Stratford and Challenger. This is a parent that did in-depth research on both the schools and decided to go with none of them. So the first one was Challenger, the second is Stratford. This is neither. So this one is interesting. On online Stratford, we could not find much of a difference between Stratford Online and the public school on curriculum and teaching. Overall, the shadow day was boring for my son, and we did not see the value of the money paid. Stratford does allow for a shadow day, so when you do tour, request it, and they will grant you one. But if you do, you will realize that the online curriculum, like we covered in our research, is not at the same level as their in-person curriculum. So if you do the shadow day, then take it with a grain of salt, because their online is not as good as their in-person. On the variation in Stratford branches, this parent said, there are a lot of differences between the different branches of Stratford School. They do not seem to maintain the same standards across all of the school branches. Out of the top 15 ranks in MK for these schools in 2019, majority of the ranks were from the San Francisco branch school. This is very important. Goes to show why. Once we looked into why, we realized it's because the teaching guidelines are not uniform. So the quality depends on the campus you're going to. That is why make sure you tour, especially Stratford. On the level of reading in Challenger, now this parent turned to Challenger. Once she looked at Stratford and saw that it is very varied based on the campus, she saw that in Challenger, Challenger emphasizes reading newspapers, being current news in upper elementary, and the school phonics kit is one of the best. The reading book recommendation list is also very popular. But then the same parent went on to say that this actually showcases their philosophy a lot, because if you look at Challenger, they'll have a very well-researched list of books that school should offer to the kids, but then their language curriculum won't be at the quality of, say, breaking that literature down, right? They'll say, okay, we should get into this reading habit, read these books, these many pages per day, great sense of decorum in that student, develop some good habits, but the same level of breakdown, say language analysis, won't be there. So this is a very interesting note, and this is a similar sentiment that a lot of the parents have shared. Finally, on a parent that's stuck to a top public school. Now, it's not necessary that you have to go to a private school to succeed. There are some top public schools. If you are in that district, then you should look into that as well. So this is a parent that is from an engineering background, software background from India, and said, okay, the way I want to go about this is both these schools don't match my expectation, and I'm going to bridge the gap between public and private school level of education by going to an external academy. So on Challenger versus Stratford, I was initially planning and attending their school session, but their standards are not up to my expectation. On Challenger, Challenger's intent is that they give more homework to the parents, but they will think that if you do that, you're doing a good job. But they don't understand the pace of the kids or help them if they are weak. This is very important because both these schools, specifically Challenger, will not cater to the level of the student, right? They might to a certain extent, but overall, the pace is relatively fast for all of the students. The expectation is that, hey, you adjust to our pace, not that we are going to adjust it to what you are capable of doing, right? But on Stratford, the same parent said that, okay, they focus on multiple skills in addition to academy, like the sports, spelling bee, speaking, but that's all in paper. They don't coach, but conduct them. The kid's ability is limited to what they can do. The parent went on to say that they have explored these two private schools, not other schools, just these two. They're still looking for a good one that goes with the pace of the child, so specific to the child, and they're in that journey currently. This parent went to RSM first, and then actually is with Think Academy. So they thought, okay, instead of going to a private school that I'm not that sure of, why don't I look at these academic institutions that do excel in terms of mathematics or STEM fields, and then decided to go with Think Academy as well. So that was an interesting perspective. I thought you guys should get all of the common ones that we had. And as usual, we do have a Q&A in the end, so I would love to take your questions if you have any. Now would be the time. So I will open up the chat. If you want to type it in, you can go ahead and do that, or you can actually unmute yourself, whatever you prefer. Okay. I have the first question. You spoke about the ROI comparison with Harker. What about basis independent? That is a great question. So basis is something we will be covering in our next few webinars. So do watch out for that. I will give you the access code for that. And let me go back to that slide. As you can see, both the schools are a lot cheaper than the elite schools and have the same level of accolades. I wouldn't say the same, but a relatively great level of accolades if you consider the costs. Basis in terms of learning philosophy is very strong in STEM as well. And in terms of the ROI, we will break that down in the future webinars, but I will share the link for you to take part in that as well. Also, for that question, we actually have one of our education specialists, Ms. Judy Lee, and she can also answer that and add to that question there, Sanket.
Okay, so I'm here to answer some questions, and I'm Judy. So the first question I noticed that is, are there any specific Stratford branches that you think are very good? So actually, as Zubin talked before, every Stratford branches, they have their own like learning styles, and they will focus on different aspects. For example, someone will focus on the math competitions, and others will focus on the arts learning. So in terms of like the good, we will have some different aspects and metrics. So as for like teachers who are most caring to children, and in this aspect, we will believe that Winchester is the best one, because we have collected a lot of feedback from parents, and they all mention that teachers there are super nice to children. And in terms of the San Bruno campus, and for this one, this campus is really about like arts learning. So around the campus and about like the professional learnings, they were all concerned, or they were all regarding to the arts learning. And for the Anza Boulevard, it is the largest campus for Stratford, and there is a big park around, so the environment is super good. And in terms of the Fremont is actually like a new campus, so we know like the waiting list is very long, and the math competitions are super good. However, the environment is not good because there's a factory around. So the key takeaway we got from parents is that we need to really talk with to have a school tour around each campus, and then we can like stay there, for example, after school, and we will have parents pick up their children. And at that time, you can talk with parents to get some very in-person feedback from them. And in preference that basis Harker Nueva have towards Stratford and Challenger. So actually, we will believe that if you choose Stratford and Challenger, you are choosing to have a place to let your children to have the ordinary education, as well as to have a better learning environment compared with public schools. However, if you want to have very advanced learning, and to have like one aspect can be filtered in a better way, maybe like Harker and Neva will be a very good choice. However, we also compared like different different stages. So if your children are at elementary school level, we believe Stratford and Challenger is super good, because we know like Harker or Nueva, they do not provide very rigorous learning or like academic systems, and they are kind of like the public schools. However, for Stratford and Challenger, their curriculum are super organized, and the students there can have the very consolidated like base to learn math and other STEM curriculums. And what about the high school admission from Stratford? So sadly, currently Stratford do not have high school, so they only have like middle school, and all of those like very outstanding students from Stratford will go to Harker and New Eva. So that's the reason why it is so hard to get into the ninth grade of Harker, because all of those outstanding students from Stratford and Challenger, they will go to Harker and compete for that. And how would you rate Stratford Washington Park? We believe Washington Park is really deserves a try. And we also talked with the headmaster, and we also have some connection with the headmaster there. We believe they really care about especially the Asian students, and they are willing to have outside like activities to be provided with students there. So we believe that if you want, we can have like, we can invite the headmaster, or we will introduce like the open house of the Stratford to have more detailed learning about this campus. Does BASIS prefer students from Challenger or Stratford? So actually BASIS is quite another story, because BASIS is developing in recent years. At the very beginning, they really focus on like academic performance. However, as BASIS want to compete for the rankings and compete with like Harker, they are generally like they are more and more caring about other aspects in terms of sports and other things. But we believe BASIS, if you want to admit it by BASIS, the most important thing you need to maintain is that your academic performance, your GPA, and your like STEM learning must be great enough. However, if you want to enter BASIS, and we also get feedback from parents in their entrance exam, the grammar is super hard. It's quite hard. Like if you just enter a public school, it's hard for you to get a high score in the grammar part of the entrance exam for BASIS. So in that case, you need to prepare ahead. And the Stratford or Challenger, they all have like better grammar or literature learning than public schools. Does New Eva prefer students from Challenger or Stratford? I believe for New Eva, they actually have a very standard line, that is your gifted your like IQ must achieve 130 or even 135. And in terms about the admission for the New Eva, we will talk about later in our next webinar.
Oh yeah, sure. That is the great question there.
Yes, we will have our next webinar about New Eva, Harker, BASIS, Pinewood, and Crystal Springs. So they will be the best. They will look at the top private schools. Maybe next page, the top private schools in the Bay Area. So we will have like very detailed information about those schools, like the admission rate and what kind of children are preferred in those schools, and what preparation we can do in order to go to those schools.
If you're interested in these schools in particular, I do recommend you can scan that QR code over here and register for that event. Particularly, we're going to cover all these schools that you see on the screen and a lot more, and have a deep analysis just like we did today for these schools as well.
Yes, thank you. And we know that Stratford will have a high school, and we also attend the open house. But unfortunately, there are little like information about the high school for Stratford, and we only know that the headmaster are coming from like the northern part. Sorry, the eastern part of the USA. Yes, do you have any other questions?
We had a parent talking about the admissions from after high school from Stratford compared to Challenger. So what kind of admissions do we have from Stratford versus Challenger after high school?
Okay, so for this one, it's kind of a tricky question, because Stratford and the Challenger, like both of them, like are reluctant to show the detailed like the detailed statistics about the enrollment. And based on what we know is that it's for different campus, they have like different statistics. And for those schools who, for example, the Fremont and the Anza, yes, I think Palo Alto, for those two campuses, they have better results based on the parents' feedback, because for those schools, the group is smaller, and the student teachers will give give better feedback, or the recovery letter to the recommendation letters to those high schools.
Which of these schools need more parent involvement? That is an interesting question. It depends upon how you're defining parental involvement. Do you mean the parents need to be involved to diversify the level of activities the students are doing? If you could elaborate a little bit more on that, I will be able to help you a little bit better. Can you also include Helios in the presentation? Sure. Thank you for the suggestion. We will do our best to incorporate that for you. What about Stratford Palo Alto? As Judy said, that is one of the schools that has glowing recommendations, and the campus does check out on all of the boxes. Judy can elaborate a little bit more on Palo Alto in particular.
Yes, for Palo Alto, like parents who choose Palo Alto Stratford because there are no other choices around near them. So however, we also found that because the public school quality in the Palo Alto school district is quite good, so few people will, or few parents will choose Palo Alto Stratford, which make the school as a small group, and the middle school will only have 2 classes. So we believe maybe in the elementary school it's okay to have just 3 classes or 2 classes. When it comes to middle school, that will be another story, because at the middle school, we believe children need to prepare for their leadership project and to prepare for the high school. And in that case, Palo Alto School District might be too small for the students to try new things.
That's great. Thank you, Judy. Before we answer the remaining questions, it seems that some parents don't have any questions, so I'll just show you all the upcoming activities that we have, and then we can go on to answer some of the questions that have come in recently. So, as you saw today, we have a deep expertise in the private schools, specifically those in the Bay Area, and we're willing to help you guys out more if you do need some recommendations. Every student is different, so every student's strengths and weaknesses, let's say, aligns better with a certain school. So if you do need more advice, we are willing to help you out. For the attendees of this webinar specifically, you can register for a free one-on-one consulting session by scanning the QR code below. You land onto our Calendly page. So although this advice is general, each student is different. So we'll be able to give you a more specialized and more student-specific recommendation on what we think is the best school for you. We have no affiliations with any of these schools. And if you scan this QR code, only for the attendees of this webinar, it is free. If anyone else does, unfortunately, that would not be the case. But if you have attended the webinar, feel free to scan the QR code, and we would be happy to help you out. Besides that, we also have a Bay Area schools discussion group on Facebook. Say you don't have the time to make a webinar or attend a webinar, and you want your answers quick. We have our specialists on a Facebook group called the Bay Area Schools Discussion Group and Parents Discussion Group. You can scan this QR code to join that group. I recommend, if you have any questions, you can leave it there as well. And we do have a lot of specialists on that group who will answer your question in detail, and you can have follow up as well. So scan that QR code if you want to be part of that. Besides this, we have upcoming events in our Math Kangaroo workshop. This is a free workshop that is ongoing, and we have our Math Kangaroo mock test on the Think Academy website that is live and free right now. We have our Math Kangaroo information webinar. on the 28th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And we have our top Bay Area private schools webinar on the 3rd, as you can see, at 7 p.m. Pacific, so 3rd of November. That is where we will get into all of the other schools, and as per your recommendation, even discuss some of the schools that you guys have suggested. So do tune into that. For that, as I mentioned earlier, you can scan this QR code and land on the page to sign up for that event. If you want to look into all the other schools like Harker, Nueva, Basis, Vinewood, Crystal Springs, all of these different schools that you're curious about. If you're interested in the Math Kangaroo workshop that I was talking about, we have a free workshop ongoing where we basically have daily problem solving using past papers 1998 onwards, and try to give parents some source of daily activity, and also a series of mock tests so you can prep for Math Kangaroo. The Academy, Think Academy, has our students are about 45% of them are MK medalists. And when they do go into upper elementary, there is a staggering 75% AMC8 award rate. So the students are doing well, and we would be happy to share those resources for free. You can scan that QR code to join the WhatsApp group. And lastly, we do have our upcoming webinar on the Math Kangaroo analysis and future prep. So if you're interested in math competitions, I recommend scanning that QR code. That will be next week, 6:30 p.m. Pacific to 7:30 p.m. Pacific on October 28th. So scan that QR code to join the group for that and reserve your spot. And let's back to some of the questions. So now that we have that out of the way, we can look at some of the other questions. How is ROI measured? That's a good one, Nish. So obviously, like I said, the learning philosophy and methodology is very subjective, right? So there's no way of ranking that, because if you're going to rank that, you're ranking your opinion. But in terms of accolades for math competitions, in terms of accolades for debates, these are all things that can be quantified. So if we compare all of those versus the tuition fee for that school, then we can get a general ROI, not a specific figure. And even if it is general, it is pretty obvious that if you're looking at it purely from the perspective of accolades, academic progress, the level of schooling, these things are offered at a very high level at Stratford and Challenger, slightly higher at Harker. And with Harker, why it is difficult to give you an ROI from, say, a learning philosophy is because, like I said, those things cannot be quantified. So even if Harker is doing a lot better and instilling in a philosophy that you think is magnificent, and it is taught by teachers that are of very high caliber, these are not things that we can put into numbers. But as per a general ROI, if you want academic success, it is more value for your buck if at Stratford and Challenger versus Harker. Okay, so now we can we're done with the questions. If there's any other questions, feel free to actually go on our Facebook group. Like I said, you might take some time to gather your thoughts and get a detailed question out, and you're more than we invite you to do so. So go onto our Facebook group, and if you have any questions, you can leave it on the Facebook group as a post. If you don't want it public, that's okay. Just send a message to one of the admins, and we can have that answered for you.
Okay, I noticed one last question that is like, what about like the best public school district in Bay Area? So in terms of the public school district, we will like focus on the public high school as well. So as for the public high school, we believe Mission San Jose Lynbrook and Ganghai, they are definitely the top three public high school, best high school in the Bay Area. So we also have a webinar about that. You can check our YouTube. We have talked about like the Lynbrook, Mission San Jose, and Ganghai, Palo Alto High, Cupertino High, and stuff. So if also at Saratoga and Monte Vista. So if you want to learn like which high school will have different like focus, STEM, or like business training, other things, you can also check our YouTube to watch that. And we will also share about the information about the public school, high school in our Facebook group mentioned in our slides.
All right then. Again, don't hesitate. Feel free to leave your questions again in that Facebook group, and we'll get back to you with a detailed response. Thank you guys so much for attending. I appreciate your time, and I will see you guys for the following activities. Hope to see you soon.